Trigger point, war debt. This is an analysis of the introduction into the American Revolutionary War and some of the problems that led to that crisis. So to begin with, let's go ahead and look at the payback. Now recall in the previous lesson we were looking at the French and Indian War. England was victorious in the war, but it still found itself in a large amount of debt. Don't forget, war is expensive. The United States, on average, will spend billions of dollars on their military, and that's even without major armed conflicts in parts of the world. The citizens of England, those would be the people actually living in the actual country of England, wanted nothing to do with having to pay for something they had no part in. Why should I have to pay taxes or pay for a war debt that did not directly affect me? The government of England decides that the colonists in North America will pay back the debt instead. Again, the war was on your land. It's your problem. You will need to pay for it. In doing so, the government also keeps the people happy and calm inside the homeland of England. Plus, the colonists were becoming restless already and not necessarily following the instructions of England. So understand that at this point, the colonists are almost 2,000 miles away from England, in the water, without transportation aside from wooden boats, which sometimes would make it to the shore and sometimes would not. That's a lot of time to yourselves and a lot of time to stir up your own trouble. So several acts were passed to recover some of the financial losses from the war. The first was the Stamp Act, which is exactly what it sounds like. Piece of paper, got to put a stamp on it. Want to mail it somewhere? Got to put a stamp on it. Imagine if you were charged every time you sent something via social media. That would get annoying very quickly. That was the Stamp Act. The Townshend Act, Townsend Act, was taxed on paper, paint, ink, etc. So think of like going to Staples and having a special tax on all the things at Staples. And then finally the Tea Act, which was the taxation on tea. We laugh a lot about the Tea Act, but also remember at this time, you don't have water purification systems. You're drinking something from the ground. It might kill you, it may not. And it wasn't always tasting the best. Tea was a huge, huge priority inside England and really throughout a lot of the world. Tea, as we know through the sake of tea leaves, have been around for thousands of years based out of Asia. England had just started getting into the business, the East India Trading Company, and so had the opportunity to really push tea. So they tax it, and this results in a protest referred to as the Boston Tea Party. Now, here's what you need to know about the Boston Tea Party. First of all, it wasn't a real party. It was a protest. Several colonists, they dressed up as Native Americans, hopped on board a British cargo ship in Boston, and threw crates upon crates of tea overboard. In today's numbers, they destroyed almost $4 million worth of goods. So that was their protest of saying, if you're going to tax us for all this, we're just going to get rid of it ourselves and we're going to ruin it. It was a protest over the taxation of tea. We laugh at this, but tea was very critical, and to this day, it's still a common drink of England. It tastes better than the water, and it was a major industry connecting England to the rest of the world. So England was furious about this. For some reason or another, the Boston Tea Party pushes them over the edge. So they passed the Boston Port Act, and it shuts down the entire port of Boston, which means no ships are coming into Boston, and also businesses within the city. England had this belief that if they could punish the people of Boston, it would serve as a reminder for the rest of the colonies to shape up or ship out. The other thing that took place was England took away the government. They passed the Massachusetts Government Act, which removed the government from Massachusetts as a colony and gave all the power to England. Also, there was no justice, so they administered the Justice Act, or Administration of Justice Act, which removed the trial process. So now, if you're convicted of a crime, you didn't have a trial. You were just found guilty. Because of things like this, when we look back at the Constitution, which will be written later, we're going to find out that things like the Massachusetts Government Act and the Administration of Justice Act are two of the reasons why we have specific rights to this day inside of our Bill of Rights. So Boston was also hit with the Quartering Act, which also plays into the Bill of Rights. The Quartering Act, which is a bizarre sounding thing, stated that a government official of some sort, a soldier for example, of Great Britain, could occupy a house if necessary to rest, and the owner had no say over it. While we look at that today and go and frequently think, this is absolutely absurd, The people were furious about this at the time. Now, what you need to know is England thought this would get people in line and get them to be obedient and good citizens. And that completely backfired. This is where we start to see the beginnings of the American stubbornness of the people. And it starts in the colonies when they're still under the rule of Great Britain. When they shut down Boston, it actually does the complete opposite. It rallies the rest of the colonies to the point to where they feel bad for the people of Boston and they react on it. They saw England as an abuse of power, and they were also questioning what authority England had to treat them this way. So they started creating pamphlets and brochures condemning the acts of the government. Men began to meet in secret to coordinate ways to get rid of the British. And the First Continental Congress, which was a group of individuals of white land-owning males, got together in secret in 1774 and had a representative from each colony, minus Georgia. And they met at Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to begin the process of declaring their independence. So in 1774, they're finally sick of it. They start getting ideas and brainstorming on how to rebel against Great Britain. From the 1700s to today, we find that frequently those in power may use abusive tactics to control the populace. The Great Britain is not the only example, it's just one of the examples. However, from the early formations of society to the present day, more times than not, this action tends to spark a strong desire for independence from that authority. So this is a theoretical piece about societies and sociology. Many times